The first thing Quentin Graye noticed as the shuttle docked with the alien research vessel was the silence. Not the kind of silence that fills a quiet room, but the kind that makes your heartbeat sound like a drum in your ears. He adjusted the collar of his standard-issue diplomatic jumpsuit, the white fabric already wrinkled from the 8-hour ride through orbit. The docking clamps hissed, and the pressure seal finalized with a low chug. A light turned green. Quentin exhaled. "Let's get this over with." The airlock opened, revealing a hallway that gleamed like wet ice. Everything was metallic, too smooth, with no visible joints or bolts. A single figure stood waiting at the end. Tall, with translucent skin veined with soft blue light, it wore a fitted robe of shifting color. Its head was elongated, eyes set far apart and unblinking. "You are Quentin Graye," it said, voice clear but distant. "Right, and you are." Quentin stepped forward, suitcase in hand. "I am Vellet, lead physiological analyst for the Trisken Science Commission." Vellet turned without another word and began walking. Quentin followed, his boots thudding against the floor. No echo. They passed through several chambers filled with strange instruments, clear tubes with floating organs and holographic arrays that flickered to life as they passed. Quentin tried not to stare. "I read your report," Quentin said, breaking the silence. "The one where you claim the human heart is structurally inadequate." Vellet didn't slow. "It is not a claim, it is an observation based on all available data. Your species' cardiac organ is inefficient, emotionally reactive, and prone to failure." Quentin scoffed. "You've been watching hospital documentaries." "No, we dissected 17 preserved specimens and observed over 5,000 cardiac events across your species' networks. The data is thorough." Quentin frowned. "That's not the whole picture." Vellet stopped in front of a large door. "That is why you are here. We will test it." The door opened with a soft hiss, revealing a medical chamber bathed in blue light. A reclining chair sat in the middle, surrounded by equipment too advanced for Quentin to understand. Vellet gestured. "Please sit. You will undergo a series of monitored stress and capacity evaluations." Quentin hesitated. "You're not going to dissect me, are you?" "No, you are alive. Dissection would invalidate the results." "Comforting." Quentin placed his suitcase on the floor and sat down. The chair adjusted automatically, lifting his legs and supporting his back. Cold pads pressed against his chest, arms, and temples. Over the next 2 hours, Quentin was subjected to increasingly bizarre simulations. First came the physical tests, treadmill sprints until he nearly blacked out, resistance training with weighted exosuits, climbing simulations with gravity shifts. Then came the psychological ones. Vellet projected highly realistic scenarios directly into his mind: freefall from a skyscraper, being trapped under ice, losing a loved one in a crowd. Each time, Quentin's heart rate spiked but stabilized. Each time, Vellet made a note. "You cried during the third sequence," Vellet said. "The one where your sibling was lost." "Yeah, that's called being human." "Your cardiac response was elevated but did not reach failure." "Curious." "That's because it's built for that, for pain and love and loss." Vellet tilted his head. "We shall see." The final test was unexpected. The lights dimmed and a panel opened in the wall, revealing a sealed chamber. Inside was a small creature, feathered, frightened, its wing bent at an unnatural angle. "What is this?" Quentin sat up. "A moral stressor. The creature is injured. You may leave and conclude the test, or you may attempt to assist it. Doing so will elevate your physiological distress, possibly dangerously. That's not a fair test. Your heart is not fair, it is reactive. This is the point." Quentin stood. "Open the chamber." Vellet hesitated, then complied. The moment the door slid open, Quentin stepped in. The creature flinched, trying to crawl away. He knelt, arms steady. "Easy, buddy, I'm not here to hurt you." He examined the wing, carefully lifting it. The break was clean. He tore a strip from the hem of his undershirt and used it to secure the wing against the creature's body. It took several minutes. When he stepped out, his breathing was ragged and his hands shaking. You endangered your cardiac stability for a non-sapient life form, Vellet said. Quentin slumped back into the chair. Yeah, and I'd do it again. Vellet studied the monitors, then silently walked out of the room. The next day, Quentin was kept under observation. Fluids, meals, vitals monitored every hour. He wasn't allowed to leave. On the third day, Vellet returned. You are not fully recovered, still a bit winded. I'll manage. There is more. Quentin raised an eyebrow. More. We located another anomaly. Your cardiac recovery rate is significantly faster than our projections. Your ejection fraction increased after the stress tests. It should have decreased. Is that a good thing? It is not understood, but it contradicts our hypothesis. Quentin leaned back against the pillow. Maybe your hypothesis was wrong. Vellet remained silent. By the end of the week, Quentin was cleared to move around the vessel. He explored cautiously, always under escort. The Trisken researchers watched him with unreadable expressions. Not hostile, curious, maybe even respectful. One morning, Vellet approached him in the observation deck, where Earth hung in the distance like a bruised marble. We are preparing a formal revision to our classification of human physiology, he said. You're admitting you were wrong. We will say incomplete. Your cardiovascular system is inefficient by our standards, but it possesses resilience unaccounted for in our models. Quentin nodded. That's usually how it goes with us. There is one final request, Vellet said. A demonstration of adaptive cardiac endurance under prolonged duress. It will be physically painful. Quentin turned. How painful? You may experience temporary cardiac irregularities, possible syncope. You will be monitored throughout. Quentin exhaled through his nose. Let's do it. The final test was a controlled atmospheric pressure chamber. The goal was to simulate a sudden drop in oxygen levels akin to high-altitude exposure, combined with emotional triggers through neurostimulation. Quentin lasted 14 minutes before passing out. He woke up on a gurney covered in sweat with a dull ache in his chest. You are alive, Vellet said, and your cardiac rhythm has stabilized. Quentin coughed. That was worse than college finals. You should rest. Are we done now? Vellet considered. Yes, the test is complete. Your heart has demonstrated structural, adaptive, and emotional integrity beyond expectations. Quentin let out a tired laugh. So, what's the verdict? Vellet paused. The human heart is fragile in structure, but not in function. It is unexpectedly strong. Quentin closed his eyes. Tell your people, he said. We're more than what we look like. I believe they already know, Vellet said. We were the ones who needed convincing. Recovery took 2 more days. Vellet offered Quentin a data crystal containing a full report, with annotations and a formal apology from the Trisken Commission for the previous mischaracterization. As the shuttle prepared to undock, Vellet stood beside him. You have altered our understanding of your species. I didn't do anything special, Quentin said. You just finally looked past the surface. Vellet nodded. Goodbye, Quentin Graye. The hatch closed behind him and the shuttle drifted away from the Trisken vessel. Earth grew larger in the viewport, warm and familiar. Quentin leaned back, hand over his chest. His heart beat slow, steady, strong. Quentin awoke to a low vibration humming through the shuttle's hull, the kind that meant re-entry was still a few hours off. He blinked against the soft blue cabin lights and reached for the water bulb floating just above his head. After a few clumsy attempts, he caught it and took a sip. His chest still ached faintly, not sharp but persistent, a dull echo of the final test. The pilot, a silent Trisken drone with a face like polished coral, hadn't acknowledged him once during the journey. Quentin didn't mind. Most diplomats hated solitude. He'd grown to appreciate it, especially after what he'd just been through. He rubbed his sternum. The bruising was minor, they'd said. The neurostimulators had been calibrated within safe ranges. Still, it felt like he'd been run over by a philosophical argument made of bricks. 2 hours later, Earth's orbit welcomed them with the dull familiarity of bureaucracy. The shuttle docked at the Intermediary Liaison Station, a floating slab of metal that hadn't been updated since humans were still using USPs. He stepped out and was greeted by a human medic in a Navy uniform. "Mr. Graye, they want you in the debrief as soon as you're cleared." Quentin nodded. "Give me 5 minutes not surrounded by aliens and I'll be ready." The medic hesitated. "Actually, sir, there's one more." He turned to see a Trisken shorter than Velvet, with a more angular robe and a face that glowed faintly green instead of blue. The alien had a portable diagnostic unit slung over one shoulder. "I am Nyrk," it said without preamble. "Secondary analyst, you were returned with anomalies." Quentin narrowed his eyes. "Anomalies like what? I passed everything." Nyrk's pupils adjusted like camera lenses. "Your heart initiated an unregistered rhythm sequence following the final test. We believe it is a form of adaptive modulation triggered by prolonged emotional exposure. This is undocumented. Is that a problem? Possibly an advantage. You may possess a unique variant." "No offense," Quentin said, "but I'd rather not be poked at again." Nyrk ignored that. "We request a voluntary follow-up scan, non-invasive." 10 minutes. Quentin sighed and followed the alien to a side room that looked like a dental office designed by someone who hated comfort. The scanner was a floating ring that adjusted around his torso. "Do not move," Nyrk said, activating the device. The ring lit up softly and began rotating. Quentin felt a mild vibration in his ribs like a distant cello string. A minute passed, then another. Nothing hurt, which was a welcome change. Nyrk examined the results in silence, tapping at a holographic panel. "Your heart underwent structural remodeling." "Like it got stronger." "No. It changed shape slightly. Your left ventricle increased in wall thickness by a small margin. The effect is subtle, but not consistent with baseline human adaptation." Quentin stared at him. "You're saying my heart evolved in a week?" "Not evolution. Reaction, stress-induced plasticity. Your body responded to extreme conditions by reinforcing itself." "I don't glow or shoot lasers if that's what you're checking for." Nyrk shut the panel. "We request a tissue sample." "No." "Hair follicle?" "No." "Epithelial scraping?" "Oh, come on." Nyrk blinked slowly. "We will revise our request." Quentin stood. "You do that." He left the room and made his way to the debrief hall, where a trio of Earth representatives in gray suits sat behind a long table. A digital recorder hovered above them. Behind them, a window overlooked the Earth's curvature. The man in the center spoke first. "Mr. Graye, welcome back. We've reviewed the Trisken transmission logs. You did well." Quentin sat without being asked. "You didn't send me there expecting a medal ceremony, did you? You were tasked with correcting a diplomatic mischaracterization." "You did that, but the physiological data you generated has wider implications." The woman on the left leaned forward. "They've started recalibrating their species resilience index. Humanity just moved up 16 positions." Quentin frowned. "Because I didn't die during a panic attack. Because you demonstrated something they didn't think was possible. Emotional endurance with physiological reinforcement." He rubbed his temples. "I didn't train for that, I just reacted." "That's the point," she said. "They can't replicate it." "They're trying." Quentin looked out the window. "They're going to keep testing people, aren't they?" The third man, older with tired eyes, nodded. "Volunteers, carefully screened, but they're fascinated, and more importantly, they're respectful now." Quentin stood. "I'm not doing it again." "No one's asking you to." "Good," he said, "because my heart could use a vacation." Later that evening, he sat alone in the station's observation dome, nursing a cup of electrolytes and watching the slow spin of satellite debris below. His chest still felt tight, not in pain, but like it remembered something. A soft chime interrupted him. "Nyrk again. How did you get up here?" Quentin asked. "I was granted temporary clearance." "You always this persistent?" Nyrk didn't answer. It held out a small, disc-shaped object. "This is yours." Quentin turned it over in his hand. "What is it?" "A structural model of your cardiac organ, based on the final scans. We engraved the vector paths." Quentin squinted. Fine etchings lined the surface spirals, intersecting lines, arcs that seemed to shimmer when tilted. "This is artistic." Functionally accurate models often are. Quentin set the disc on the ledge beside him. What do you want from me? Nayark tilted its head. Your species may possess a mechanism we lack. We call it effective resilience. The ability to sustain emotional distress without systemic collapse. You're describing stubbornness. No, your cardiovascular system modulates biochemical feedback in ways that preserve function under cognitive duress. This is rare. Quentin leaned back. So what now? You clone me. We are prohibited from that, but we will study the phenomenon with your cooperation, he sighed. You're not going to go away, are you? No, he picked up the disc again. If I agree, no more panic chambers. No more passed out on the floor experiments, agreed. And I get to eat real food during all this. Nayark paused. We will prepare accommodations. Quentin nodded slowly. Fine, but I want to see the research. I want to know what you're learning. Nayark's eyes widened slightly. Unusual request. I've had my heart used as a science project. Least I can ask is to be treated like more than a container. You will be included. Quentin stood. Then we have a deal. As Nayark left, the observation dome's lights dimmed automatically. Earth continued turning below, oblivious. Quentin sat back down, eyes on the horizon. His heart beat steadily, a little louder than before. 2 weeks after returning to Earth orbit, Quentin was back on the Trisken vessel not because he had to be, but because he'd agreed to one final exchange. A peer-reviewed, collaborative study conducted under bilateral oversight. No chambers, no induced trauma, no simulations. Just observation, discussion, and controlled physical diagnostics. He'd negotiated for the presence of a human cardiac specialist, and after some back and forth, the Trisken agreed. The appointment was purely symbolic, but Quentin insisted. The medical bay this time had been modified. The walls had been softened with biopolymer panels that adjusted temperature and luminance in real time, and the diagnostic chair had been replaced with a reclining platform that could pass for a high-end spa bed, if you ignored the translucent scanning arms suspended overhead. Dr. Evelyn Rowe, a compact woman in her late 40s with a voice like sandpaper and a habit of pointing with capped pens, adjusted her glasses and tapped the display on her portable terminal. I want this on record, she said, eyes flicking toward the nearest Trisken. This setup is still missing fundamental calibration standards. If this were a hospital, half of it would be red-tagged by safety inspectors. Vellet, standing nearby with his hands folded calmly behind his back, inclined his head. The equipment is tuned to your subject's biometric signature. It exceeds your regulatory tolerances, not falls short of them. Which means we're operating outside known ranges. That's not the same thing. Quentin lay back on the platform, arms slung over his eyes. She always like this? Only when I've had to cancel my morning rounds for space diplomacy. She glanced at him. You sure you're still having episodes, not episodes, Quentin said. It's more like echoes, like my heart's remembering that last test. Rowe checked his vitals. You're probably experiencing some form of cardiac memory. It's real. We see it in patients after prolonged arrhythmias or extreme stress. The heart retains electrical patterns longer than most people think. That's exactly what we're studying, Vellet said. Your species' cardiac rhythm exhibits behavior we previously considered incompatible with long-term structural stability. Rowe turned to him. You thought the heart would just give out from emotion. We assumed emotional triggers would accelerate deterioration. Instead, we observed compensatory adaptation. The human heart appears to reinforce itself in response to emotional strain. Rowe shot Quentin a look. So your melodrama actually did something useful, he shrugged. Vellet activated the scanning arms, which emitted a faint harmonic tone as they swept over Quentin's chest. The display above him bloomed with a layered three-dimensional model of his heart, each chamber pulsing in real time. Rowe narrowed her eyes. There's remodeling, but it's subtle. Mild concentric hypertrophy, but within athletic norms. You've never been hypertensive. Nope, I eat like a raccoon and jog when I remember to. Then it's compensatory, not pathological. You've basically trained your heart to handle stress by emotionally suffering through it. Vellet studied the projection. We theorized that the emotional centers in your brain interface with autonomic regulation in a feedback loop. But the loop is not degenerative. It's recursive and stabilizing. Rowe crossed her arms. You're describing neurocardiac resilience. That's been studied, but what you're seeing here is probably unique to Quentin's exposure. Which is why he is the focus of the final study, Vellet said. We intend to conclude today and archive the findings. Good, Quentin muttered. Because any more of this and my heart's going to sue me. The scan ended with a soft chime. The arms retracted. Rowe studied the readouts for another minute, then closed her terminal. Your heart's fine. Better than fine. You've got the kind of metrics we see in endurance athletes and monks. But none of that changes the fact that you pushed it too far. I didn't really have a choice. You did. You chose anyway. That's what makes you interesting to them, Vellet spoke. We have determined that the fragility we originally identified was not a flaw but a feature. Your cardiac system is responsive not because it is weak, but because it must be. It is the interface between cognitive burden and physical survival. Quentin sat up. So you're saying it's not just a pump, it's part of how we handle being human. Precisely. Your species possesses a heart that does not merely circulate blood. It responds to grief, joy, fear, and hope physiologically. That is not inefficient, it is remarkable. Rowe nodded reluctantly. Maybe next time start with a literature review instead of vivisection. Vellet accepted the rebuke with grace. We have revised our methods. Quentin swung his legs off the platform. So that's it, you got what you came for. We did not come for anything, Vellet replied. We came to understand, and we have. Your heart is both vulnerable and robust. It is not a contradiction, it is a paradox we had to experience to grasp. Rowe looked at Quentin. You ready to head back? He nodded. Yeah. I've had my fill of being the galaxy's most emotionally durable lab rat. As they walked toward the exit corridor, Vellet followed them to the docking threshold. There is one final artifact, the alien said. A gesture of respect. He handed Quentin a small, transparent cube. Inside, suspended in gel, was a precisely sculpted model of his heart no larger than a plum, made from a bioluminescent resin that pulsed faintly with internal light. It is accurate to the micron. We will not reproduce it. Quentin turned it over in his hands. Thanks. It's weird, but... Thanks. Rowe glanced at it. Looks like a jellyfish trapped in crystal. It is meant to be kept, Vellet said. Not studied. Consider it a recognition of what we failed to see at first. Quentin tucked the cube into a padded pocket. I'll put it next to my coffee mug. They boarded the return shuttle in silence. The ride back was smooth. Quentin watched Earth grow larger again, less like a marble this time and more like a home. Rowe sat beside him, reviewing her notes, occasionally muttering about intergalactic organ tourism and paperwork nightmares. When they landed, there was no press, no ceremony. Just a quiet arrival gate and a single customs agent who barely looked up from her screen. Quentin walked out with Rowe beside him, the cube resting in his pocket, its soft glow barely visible through the fabric. You ever going back up there? She asked. He shook his head. No need. They figured it out. Think they'll leave us alone now? They'll probably be curious about something else soon, lungs maybe, or dreams. That's how science works. Rowe paused. So what did you get out of it? Quentin smiled faintly. A better heart. She rolled her eyes. You're lucky it didn't kill you, I know, but maybe that's what makes it human. They stepped into the sunlight together, the sky above them impossibly blue. Quentin's heart beat in his chest quiet, steady, and stronger than it had ever been.